Good evening and welcome to the Kaufman Corner. With you, as always, a good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, Soren Petro with you, and we've got a lot we want to cover. As right after our last episode, the Royals went ahead and traded Adalberto Mondesi. They were not done, as we speculated. Would there be anything else? I didn't think there would be. There was. They traded Adalberto Mondesi. Zack Greinke is back. What does it mean for Bobby Witt Jr. that Mondesi has been traded? Why now? Why not maybe at the deadline? What does the Royals rotation look like now? Who's the odd man out? We're going to cover it all right now on the Kaufman Corner.
This is the Kaufman Corner Podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
And thank you very much, and thank you for joining us again. If you're catching us via the podcast a little bit later in the week, we do generally record and stream live the recording of the podcast Sunday nights at 10 o'clock Central, coming to you on a Monday at 10 o'clock Central. Because of why Randy's wearing the jersey, I'm assuming this was, we didn't want to get in the way of the AFC Championship game with many of our Royals fans being Chiefs fans. And there it is, Rany decked out in his Patrick Mahomes jersey, showing the love.
I'm ready for the best podcast to ever, Soren, and to celebrate, I deliberately smashed a table on my right leg just to get into the spirit of things.
Yeah, which is what it takes to get into the spirit.
Just to feel alive.
Yes,
just to give myself a challenge.
Yeah, you're quite festive. I appreciate that for sure. Let's dive in. Where do you want to go? The news today. This has been kind of rumored for a little bit that it was going to come. Zack Greinke is back with the Kansas City Royals. At least that's the word from Ken Rosenthal. And then we've also got Adalberto Mondesi being traded right after the podcast. Last week, where do you want to begin? You pick. Which one do you want to start with?
Well, it makes sense to go in chronological order. And You know me, I like to start with bad news before good news. And that's where I fit. That's, we've done this before, but I do feel like, these are two sides of the same coin. And I'm not nearly as high on the Mondesi trade as I am on the Greinke signing. So let's start there.
Okay, let's go. Why don't you like that deal?
I just don't think they got enough. And, I think trading Adalberto Mondesi is not, it is a very poetic, disappointing end to his Royals career, but the past is prologue, and that's where we are. Adalberto Mondesi has had a disappointing career, and he's 1 year away from free agency. And we've discussed on this podcast all the reasons why, if he's not the shortstop of the future, then maybe he shouldn't be the shortstop of the present or on the roster at the present. And so I have no issues at all with the trade, letting him go, because we don't know if he's going to be healthy. We don't know if he's going to be productive. And if he is, we don't know that the Royals are going to be good enough in 2023 for it to matter. So yeah, by all means, trade him. It's a disappointment, but that's what it is. Having said that, they somehow managed to trade Adalberto Mondesi for a player who appeared in fewer major league games than he did last year, who was on an active roster for less time, if healthy, is a reliever out of the bullpen, and not even a two-way reliever, basically a lefty specialist. He's had success in the major leagues, and is under club control for 3 years, but I just feel like the value that they got for him was low enough that I would have held out for more, even if it meant going into the season with him on the roster, with Adalberto Mondesi on the roster, and gambling that maybe he gets hurt again, or that he's disappointing and brings back nothing. But knowing that if he actually gets off to a hot start, he could bring back something much more valuable than Josh Taylor.
If he gets off to a hot start, that's funny, is what I consider that to be. That's comedic. Number one, he's been hot for about 4 weeks of his entire career. He doesn't get on base, which is what everybody in the modern game wants. And we're just going to sit and assume that it's going to happen this time and he's going to stay healthy long enough for you to get him traded. I couldn't disagree with you more. I mean, I really couldn't. If they'd have just released him, I'd have been fine with it, because I think there is, and I talked with some folks and they're like, it's like a black cloud hanging over the ball club. And I think it is. And I think him in a Royals uniform is a black cloud hanging over his career. I think at some point it's time to go. Listen, the good time to move him left town years ago. This shows what he's worth. You weren't going to get anything for him. It's a, you got a hurt pitcher for a guy who's always hurt, who's coming off injury, who can't stay healthy. And now he's coming off a major injury, more surgery for him. I think it's amazing they got anything. I talked with some folks in the organization, and they do like the arm that they're getting back. They acknowledge that health is, a part of the equation. And they think he's going to be, but they do like the arm that they're getting back. They like the ability. But I just, for me, I think as many analytical minds do exist, yours being one of them, co-founder, Baseball Prospectus, they exist in vacuums, right? Not in reality. Who's giving you anything for Adalberto Mondesi? I mean, like, what did you think you were going to get for a guy who has 1 year of control left, can't stay on the field, and can't get on base even 30% of the time?
Well, for starters, I thought I'd get a player who actually has a better health record than Mondesi does. 99% of the sport.
But why? Why would anybody give up a healthier player for Adalberto Mondesi?
Because as much as we crap on his availability, and as much as you want to crap on the things he doesn't do well, the things he does do well are so top of the scale, even by major league standards, that there is a ceiling here. You're basically trading away a high ceiling for a higher floor. My concern, yes, I'm getting ratio. That's right. This is the podcast equivalent of a Twitter joke going horribly wrong. No, I think that if you're going to trade a guy with this kind of ceiling, at least get back somebody with a better floor, whether that's a player with a better health history, or a player that fits your contention timeline better. Get a prospect. Get somebody who, if they're valuable, will actually be valuable when you need them. A guy who's already burnt through half of his service time and who missed all of last year. Again, if this is a year, if you just take Josh Taylor's performance from 2019 to 2021 and move it up a year, and you're getting a guy who, in 2021, Josh Taylor threw, I think, like 41 innings or something as a left-handed reliever and had a good strikeout rate. If that's the guy you're getting, 48 innings with a 3.40 ERA, I would say, this is a reasonable value. But that was a year ago. He hasn't pitched since then due to a bad back. Like, back injuries are not, it's not something I expect to suddenly go away. And I just feel like the floor isn't much better. Instead of getting 1 year of a hurt player, you're getting 3 years of a hurt player. And the ceiling, even if it's just 1 year, the ceiling, what is Josh Taylor going to do for this team? He gives them another lefty on a team that's already signed Aroldis Chapman. They have Amir Garrett. They don't have space for Richard Lovelady. They've got Anthony Misevich. There's at least one other lefty in the bullpen. And the other thing about Taylor is that he is the success that he has had has come exclusively on the backs of left-handed hitters. He is a specialist. For his career, righties have hit 282 against him. Lefties have hit 174. He gets lefties out. Great. That's a nice skill. That is not a terribly rare skill. I mean, I just look at the guy the Royals traded Michael Taylor for. One of the guys they traded Michael Taylor for, we talked about last week, Evan Sisk. Evan Sisk was in the minor leagues last year, AA and AAA. But Evan Sisk is also kind of a sidearm lefty. You expect him to be really tough on left-handed relievers, or left-handed hitters. And get this, Against left-handed batters last year, Evan Sisk gave up 9 hits in 106 at-bats, 0.85 batting average, 1 double, no other extra base hits. Doesn't get righties out that great. They hit 236 against him in the minors. But like Evan Sisk, if you need a lefty specialist, you just got one from the Twins as half of the payment for Michael Taylor. Why are you going out and getting another one? I just feel like from a value standpoint, they could have done better. Having said that, I know, look, Adalberto Mondesi was never bringing back a top 100 prospect. And there is value in the sense, like Matt is saying here on the podcast, that he's just not on the roster anymore. I completely agree with that. And as much as the frustration that we have with how his career went, everything up until now has been on Dayton Moore. Like the decision to move him, I think JJ Piccolo was right to cut bait when he did. I think that it is a clean break with this. The Mondesi has become almost the symbol of the failure of the post-World Championship Royals to accomplish anything. And I think the willingness to move on from that and acknowledge that that promise is never going to be realized, I respect that. And the fact that he was rushed to the major leagues, the fact that they expected too much of him, all that stuff, we can pin all of that on Dayton Moore. So this is, my frustration is mostly on the way Dayton Moore handled him at the beginning. I think JJ was right to do what he did in the sense of trading him. I just think that getting the return they got for him was a little bit light. You disagree. That's fine.
I do, just because, 358 games played in 7 years. 358. Enough said. He's useless. I'm sorry. And you can say we crap on him. How is pointing out that he has a 274 batting on base percentage crapping on him? That's not crapping on him. Those are facts. 280. I'm sorry.
I'm quite aware he doesn't get on base.
Yeah, but I think in your effort to make your point about why you don't like it, you're somewhat creating a straw man argument. How are you crapping on him if you point out that he's got a 280 on base? He has a 280 on base. He's 27 years old now. He only plays 25-30% of the games that are available. That is not crapping on him. If I said the guy's only played 15 games his whole career, that's crapping on him. That's lying. That's exaggerating to make a point. I am accurately telling you, in 7 seasons, he has played 358 games.
And
I'm accurately telling you.
And in 4 seasons, Josh Taylor has thrown 102 innings.
So who cares? So neither one of them will play. That's my point. Is like, I think acting like they could have gotten more is ridiculous. The market is what it is. First of all, somebody had to need a shortstop.
Well, I was going to say, it is what it is. And that's a little bit of my frustration, is that when the Red Sox lost Trevor Story for much, maybe all of 2023, this was, to me, I immediately thought this is a heck of an opportunity. Here's a team that needs a 1-year solution at shortstop, that has some egg on its face, right, for signing Trevor Story with a kind of a pre-existing condition that they knew might lead to a problem. And 1 year later, gets, that injury flares up. And Chaim Bloom, who's under a lot of heat in Boston right now for, the Red Sox's performance last year, for, letting Xander Bogaerts go, and, obviously having traded Mookie Betts, et cetera, like, he needed a win. He needed to save face. There was a need in Boston, and to trade. So my point is, look at it from the Red Sox point of view. They needed a shortstop. It's a risk, but they were able to get him for a guy who literally didn't pitch for them last year.
Right.
Like, you're just trying to, like, a little bit more.
And a guy who didn't play last year. Right. For a guy who didn't pitch last year.
Okay, but they give up. But obviously,
not a fair deal.
But when Mondesi has played, he is far more valuable, even with that low BP, on a game by game basis, than Josh Taylor is. All right, and to jump on top of that,
3 years of control means nothing versus 1.
I mean, he's a reliever. Tell me, an everyday player for reliever, and yes, Joe, you want about every day, but to trade a guy who can play is a starting position player for a left-handed reliever, generally speaking, you're going to get more value out of the position player. Mondesi has had more value than Josh Taylor.
Well, and Taylor gets 3 years to give you the same value that Mondesi was going to give you in 1 year.
Do we even know that he's
how you add
is he healthy enough to pitch this year? Like a back injury is no.
Yes, I believe what I'm being told is yes, he will be ready to go.
All right, and I will say Mondesi may not be ready for opening day, and that certainly, like if it turns out that he's, which in itself is a bad sign because the guy was injured and had ACL surgery like in May. If he's not ready 11 months later, that in itself is a red flag. So
Listen,
it may just be his medicals are so bad that they were, looking at not having him for at least part of this season to begin with, and then they're justified in trading him for whatever they can get. But I just feel like the Red Sox were a little bit desperate. And the other thing I don't understand is how is it that we're the ones trading a player to be named later in the deal? Like, presumably that's almost nothing, but you never know.
Is.
And it's like, why on earth are we throwing in extra talent?
The word I got is that, like you said, the GM there under a little bit of fire had to try to justify, and it's window dressing to try to make the deal look better on the Boston end because the Boston end isn't happy with this deal. Okay. So understand that part of it. That's why there is a player to be named later. It's because Boston doesn't think they got enough back for what they gave up. All right. So let's keep that part of the equation in mind. I want to bring this up. I do think that this is valid. Brian says Mondesi would strike out versus a bowler. I think it's of note. Yes, if you bowled the ball up there, he would probably strike out. And I want to bring this up by Brian because Brian says, let's move on to Zach and discuss future trades. Exactly. That's what the Royals finally did. They moved on from Mondesi. Brian's point is exactly it. Get him the blank out of town. I'm tired of talking about him. Fans are tired of talking about him. Teammates are tired of talking about him. And let me give you what I think are the most important things. One, smaller part. Is pitching the currency in baseball? Dayton Moore said it, yet he never got it. Right? Arms. We want to be able to pitch. We need arms. That's what Matt Quatrero said. They are at least doing what the plan is. We need arms. We want a variety of arms. And by the way, I know like your passion and love for all things Amir Garrett. But I don't know who you think Amir Garrett is. Bobby Wagner or, one of the great lefties of all time. But you seem to think that the Royals are all set at left-handed relief pitching because Amir Garrett is on the scene. He's not even that good. This just in, okay? And so now they're at least throwing volume at the concept, which I think is big. And that's secondary. And I'm going to tell you what I think is the most important part of the equation. It's something we talked about last year, and it's something that I believe that this front office now agrees with. I don't think Dayton Moore did, but I think this is a culture change. Stop jerking around the guy you want to be your star. Do not screw around with Bobby Witt Jr. If nothing else, this is addition by subtraction. They believe he's going to be a star. So we've talked about defensively, question marks, right? Big question marks. But what did he do? He bounced all around. I talked with some folks, and they said the common thing that was being said was, around baseball, a lot of people are saying, well, why are you jerking around the guy that you want to be your pillar at shortstop? I'm with you. Like, if you want to play him at third base, that's great. I think you could have elite defense at third base. I like that idea. But you're not giving him $350 million. He does not become the face of your organization at third base unless the bat really explodes. He needs to play.
I mean, it worked for George Brett. So, I mean, you can be a superstar at third base with a great bat and good defense.
Is MJ Melendez worth more in left field or behind the dish?
Obviously, if he could catch. But left field and catcher is a lot different than third base versus short.
Is Bobby Witt Jr. worth more at short or at third?
If he's equally good defensively, then shortstop. If he's not, then.
But how do you know until he plays shortstop? And that's the problem is Adalberto Mondesi remained
You're creating a straw man argument. I never would have advocated to put Mondesi at shortstop. Like, actually, my thinking was we talked about maybe center field, but they played Mondesi at third base in 2021 was it, or 2020? It was a pandemic year. Right now, I'm not sure who the third baseman is on this team. And okay, maybe Mondesi wasn't that third baseman, but to me, I never saw Mondesi as inhibiting Witt's development if you just use Mondesi correctly. 100% agree. You do not let Adalberto Mondesi justify jerking around Bobby Witt. Witt gets priority on where he plays, everyone else fits around him.
But why do you think Adalberto Mondesi is just going to whistle his way out to what? Center field, over to second base? He's not going to sulk. He's not going to pout. He's just going to be thrilled to go play wherever you tell him where to go. Like, see, that's where I say the analytic community lives in a vacuum, right? It's a vacuum of numbers and math, and it takes away the humanity of it. Okay. Part of humanity is being a titanic pain in the ass, okay? And that is part of the problem. Are you going to have a malcontent in your clubhouse?
Well,
I believe yes, absolutely.
You might, but I don't know if playing him at third base, a position he has already played and attempted to play well and didn't seem to sulk about what he played at last. Like, that's why I agree.
I'm talking about Mondesi. Do you think Mondesi was going to be happy to play third base?
He's played it before, and he didn't sulk when he played it. That's what I'm saying. He played it at the end of 2020, and I think he played it because, was it Nicky Lopez was playing?
I object to the concept.
Well, if he wasn't willing to, then yes, it's an easy call. And again, I think we're creating a straw man argument. I'm not disagreeing that they should have traded him. I'm happy they traded him. I just think they could have squeezed the Red Sox, specifically the Red Sox being a little desperate. They could have squeezed them. If you trade him for Taylor and instead of giving the player, you're giving up the player to be named later, you get a decent prospect, a top 15 in your organization prospect. I would probably feel better.
It was not there.
Ultimately, look, this is small. We're probably spending more time on it than it justifies, because we actually agree on the concept. I think it's a good sign that the Royals are moving on for the reasons you're talking about, not just because, they're acknowledging that he was not a solution, not that they're just moving on from him, but also the tack-on effects of not getting in the way of Bobby Witt Jr., the clubhouse, that if he's not a good influence in there, not playing the position he wants to, et cetera, et cetera. We agree on all these things. I just think they could have waited or used a little more leverage. I think they may have underestimated just how desperate Boston was to get him and probably squeezed a little more. In the end, it's probably not a huge deal one way or the other.
Bobby Witt Jr. is the guy that they think has a chance to be a transformational talent. And that is why when Bobby Witt Jr. was ready to come up, Dayton Moore and J.J. Piccolo, who was the general manager last year, should have traded him at that time. You clear space for the guy, and you play him at shortstop. I believe what J.J. Piccolo said in his press conference, Bobby Witt Jr. is going to play shortstop, and he's going to play shortstop every day all year this year. That is going to be a spot. Does his defense suck, or was it because he got jerked around and he played second base one spring training and then some short, then he was playing third? That they've been screwing around with him for 2 years of where he plays. You have to find out if he is a shortstop. This is going to be theoretically the last year, if things go the way you want, that you can do that you can sacrifice games, sacrifice outs for a guy to try to work his way through whatever issues he have. They felt he was a top shelf shortstop. This deal is as much about Bobby Witt Jr. getting him the hell and everybody else the hell out of the way. And it's why you hear Nicky Lopez's name being mentioned with the White Sox. And I think it's entirely possible that Pedro Grifol is driving that train and wants to get him some Nicky Lopez up in Chicago. And I think, I don't want to see Nicky Lopez go, but I think the Royals, I think there is a clear mind now, and they're not hoping he's going to be what they hoped he could be. They're going to look at him as what he is. He's a utility player, a good one, a leader in the clubhouse, but a utility player. And I think that there's a pretty good chance that he will get moved. So I see a team that is finally, after they did all the hiring, I think what took so long is J.J. Piccolo had a lot of people to hire, and he couldn't focus on the baseball. We wanted them to be more transactional. They're more transactional. He is making moves. They are
definitely, from just the standpoint of transactionality, a lot of our reservations that we had on the pre-holiday shows, I think, have been alleviated in the month of January. They are making moves. The Nicky Lopez rumors are intriguing to me. Not that I, want to trade Nicky Lopez, or that I, don't like Nicky Lopez as a player, but I agree that if Bobby Witt is going to be your shortstop, Nicky Lopez's value comes from playing, a key defensive position well. He, was a borderline Gold Glove defender at shortstop for most of 2021. And that's one of the reasons why he shockingly had like a 4-win season. He was quietly one of the best players in the American League for 1 year. That was probably not sustainable, because I don't think he's a true 300 hitter. I don't think he's as bad as he was last year. But if his value is in playing up the middle and you're committed to Bobby Witt at shortstop and you're committed to Michael Massey at second base, and frankly, I would rather commit to Michael Massey at second base and find out what he is than stick with Nicky Lopez there, because I'm not sure what Nicky, I think we know what Nicky Lopez is.
I think the rumors about Nicky Lopez show that is their plan. Bobby Witt Jr.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So the fact that they're willing to listen, I will feel even better if they actually make the move. I mean, it's one thing for a team to be interested; it's another to make a move. But I actually, presuming they don't just give him away and they get fair value for Nicky Lopez, I actually think that would be a really good sign that JJ is following through on the promise of more transactionality. But my question, and this is completely separate from the Mondesi thing, but if we're talking about Bobby Witt, and yes, I agree, he should play a position, he should stay there. He should prove if he's gonna, if he can play shortstop or not. This is the year to find out. Having said that, who's playing third base this year for the Royals? If you go to like the roster resource, the starting third baseman right now is Hunter Dozier, and you could not come up with a better way to make it difficult for your young pitchers to find success than to put Hunter Dozier, who has been a terrible defensive third baseman for his entire career and is now on the wrong side of 30, I believe. To put him over there is just asking for trouble. The Royals I think the Royals are addressing this because they've signed two players in the past week to minor league deals, Johan Camargo and Matt Duffy. Both of them, Camargo's played kind of all over the infield, and I actually think there's probably a really good chance that he's going to be the utility infielder on this team, at least to start the year. And he was a good player. Both of them were good players like 4 years ago. There's a chance that they could be good again, but I mean these are basically flyers. These are absolutely not the guys you want as a long-term solution at third base. But I think there's actually a reasonable possibility one of these guys may be starting at third base to start the year. And on the one hand, that's a really sad indictment of the talent level on this team right now. But if that allows them to give Bobby Witt a full season at shortstop to evaluate him, I think that's fine. But I am becoming increasingly convinced that the long-term solution here is to have Bobby Witt at third base, not simply because Bobby Witt, I'm skeptical that he's going to be a good defensive shortstop, but I'm becoming increasingly convinced that Michael Garcia is the most underrated prospect in this system. And I mean, he is raking it down in winter ball. And I was actually trying to find actual statistics down there to compare him to the rest of the league. I cannot find them, unfortunately, right now. But he has really opened a lot of eyes down in Latin America this winter, and especially with his power. That was the last thing for him to develop. And I think he's probably almost certainly a better defensive shortstop than Witt is. So I think the Royals.
Why would you think that? Why would everyone the Royals say is a great defender when they're in the minor leagues and they get to the big leagues and they're not?
The difference is that I've actually seen Witt play shortstop, and I maybe that's not fair, or that is being too fair to Garcia. But I know what Witt is at shortstop, and I don't know what Garcia is. So based on his reputation, I'm inclined to think he's better. I guess,
and I could tell you they see Garcia more in 24, and so the idea is.
Right.
Figure out what you have in Bobby.
And that is my point.
That you piss away all his controllable years, it's still not knowing what he is.
I agree. And this is my point. I'm hopeful that the goal here is because I think Mark Garcia probably would benefit from another 2 or 3 months in AAA. I hope the goal here is they go into the season with Bobby Witt at shortstop, and if it's a stopgap at third base, it's a stopgap at third base. I mean, for all we know, they might go out. I mean, we know this team still loves its nostalgia. We just signed Zack Greinke, so wouldn't shock me if they bring Mike Moustakas in to camp and see if he's got anything left at third base, kick the tires there. And if he fails, then it's time to move on. But my hope is if Bobby Witt proves he can play shortstop, great. You have a franchise player at the most important position. Michael Garcia becomes a hell of a trading chip, if nothing else. But by midseason, you have to, I think playing him there every day for 80 or 90 games should be enough time. If he's not making progress at shortstop defensively, I hope that the Royals have a plan now that the fallback plan is to move him to third base. And then with the expectation that Michael Garcia will be ready to play shortstop. Like, it's good to have a plan. It's good to have a commitment to a plan, but it's also good to have plan B and plan C if plan A fails. And I hope that the Royals have their ducks in a row for backup plans if Bobby Witt doesn't work out at shortstop.
I think it's going to be interesting to see if they get Nicky Lopez dealt. If they don't, I think Nicky Lopez may be your starting third baseman, because if you look at the Rays, they will run out some guys that do not have offensive numbers that can catch the ball. And that's part of what they do to support their pitching. They run out their best defensive teams out there on a regular basis. I mean, you can look it up. They're what's his name? The guy who was here, the center fielder.
Brett Phillips.
Brett Phillips. I mean, they routinely ran Brett Phillips out there.
Brett Phillips was just an otherworldly defender. He still kind of is, which is why it's so sad he has not been able to hit even a little bit. But I feel like, I think that they gave him a chance because they thought, he did hit in the minor leagues, and there was a hope that if he did even a little bit. They have Kevin Kiermaier. That's kind of a really good example. Whereas the guy's like an average hitter, but was such an elite defender that he earned like a 6-year deal with them. But you look at like third base, for instance, they have Yandy Diaz, who I think Yandy Diaz just got like a long-term, I feel like he just got a contract extension. But Yandy Diaz, not a power guy, but had a 401 OBP last year, had a 428 OBP in 2020. Like, yeah, the Rays know you don't need big power numbers necessarily at corner positions, but they value OBP. And Diaz has always had a great OBP. And I don't think that they want to just punt offense if they can get. If they can get both, it's even better.
The plan is to have guys that can really field it and can hit. But like let's be clear, they're just getting started with a new approach, right? So to be in year 10 of the program in Tampa and say, why aren't the Royals all caught up here in 3 months? I think is unfair. They're moving guys. It's going to take time to get to what it is they want to be. It doesn't just happen overnight. And listen, if you're going to preach pitching, then put defense around it.
Right.
And what's wrong with finding out what Nate Eaton is?
That is the creative high risk option at third base. In part because we know he's a fantastic outfield defender, and you don't want to just lose that. But I would actually be very interested. I'd certainly rather give Nate Eaton a try if he shows something in spring training there defensively than run out a retread like Camargo or Duffy. I think here's the common thread that can bind all of this together. You're talking about like how, the Rays are in year 10 and the Royals are just getting started. It's very frustrating to sort of admit this, but I think I know from conversations I've had with people that I'm only now appreciating just how little changed when Piccolo was first named to the GM position and Dayton Moore was bumped upstairs to president. I thought it was more of a collaborative effort, and the more I learned, the more I realized Dayton Moore was still really in charge. And in a way, I mean, that's frustrating in looking at the past, but for where the Royals are now, it actually makes me feel a little bit better, because rather than looking at, Piccolo has been general manager now for 18 months and hasn't done anything, he's actually been general manager for about 5 months. He's actually been in charge of the team for 5 months. And, that when we say 5 months, it's really like 2 months, because he took over after the trading deadline during the season, where you can accomplish essentially nothing between August 1st and the end of the season. And so all the things that frustrated us from last offseason throughout the year, obviously the pitching coach debacle, not trading guys like Scott Barlow at the deadline, all that stuff really can be laid at the feet of Dayton Moore.
Yeah.
And so I feel, I do have this sense of frustration, but I have to take a step back and appreciate that we really know even less about Piccolo than I thought we did, which is good in a way, because a lot of the things we thought were things we didn't like about the Royals' approach over the last 18 months. And I feel like I do need to reset a little bit and judge him on the merits just in the last 4 or 5 months. And even the moves that we disagree with, even the Jordan Lyles signing, I hate it on paper, but it has yet to bear, we've yet to see any evidence, hard evidence one way or the other, that it's going to work. So, the Royals, I have to trust at this point that there is a plan, even if I don't agree with it. But until we see it come to fruition on the field, I think we just have to give Piccolo a bit of a pass here.
The Kaufman Corner podcast is brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. It's Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Gann Asphalt offers free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project, every single one, comes with a written warranty. You can find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Make sure you tell them that you heard about him here on the Kaufman Corner podcast. Rany, let's switch gears to Zack Greinke is back. This, I think, was rumored for a while. I think it was a matter of, is Zack coming back? And if he's coming back, the Royals are going to be the team that makes sure to bring him back. Happy with this. Obviously, I think we all are. He was, their second best starting pitcher last year. But what does it do overall? First of all, let's just get your thoughts on bringing it back. What do you think about that part of the equation?
Yeah, I mean, I can't even pretend to be objective about Zack Greinke, who's one of my favorite all-time
Sure.
Royals ever. But it's nice that I can, I can talk about emotionally how much it means to me and how much it would mean to me if he ever were to pitch a meaningful game for the Royals after all of these years, literally 19 years after he made his major league debut. I still hold out to the dream that, he might actually pitch a meaningful game in September or wonder of wonders and make a start in a playoff game for the Royals. And neither one of us is expecting that for 2023, but look, stranger things have happened. The Chiefs have hosted 5 consecutive AFC championship games. Compared to that, Zack Greinke starting this October at almost 40 years of age, a playoff game for the Royals, it's positively reasonable. So there's that emotional side of it, but what I like is you can very easily justify this based purely on performance. I mean, his last year, look, he had one of the lowest strikeout rates of any pitcher in the major leagues, and yet he had a 3.68 ERA and a 4.03 FIP. And he's, it's a 1-year deal, and I don't think we haven't heard the exact terms yet. My understanding is it's a base. The reason for the long time to get him signed was simply trying to balance a base salary with incentives. Like, I think originally the hope was that he would sign for a lower base and more incentives if he pitched well. But based on what the pitcher market was this year, it's completely understandable that he would want a little bit more guaranteed money, given that he did pitch well last year. And I think it's probably about $8 million as a base salary and probably a couple million in incentives.
I think the incentives are more than that.
Okay, but the point is, $8 million guaranteed. That's less than Jordan Lyles is making this year. Like, I keep coming back to Jordan Lyles. I know, but like, if you can justify 2 years for Jordan Lyles, you can absolutely justify 1 year at basically the same annual salary for Zack Greinke, who last year had basically pitched better than Jordan Lyles has ever pitched in his career. You've thrown this back at me last podcast, I think. My statement that there's no such thing as a bad 1-year contract. Well, I'm going to take that back and throw it back at you. There's no such thing as a bad 1-year contract. And that's what Zack Greinke's on. If he's lost it, oh, well, it's 1 year. And, if nothing else, his mentorship in the clubhouse, and it sounds strange to say that, but I mean, you see the stories just from his 1 year in Kansas City last year, all the young pitchers, Singer, Lynch, Mooch, all these guys have, a story to tell about Zack Greinke, and all seem to really appreciate having him around. I mean, having a future guaranteed Hall of Famer in your presence has to be, a benefit for a young pitcher who's trying to find his way and trying to find success. Pick the brain of one of the smartest guys who's ever pitched, a guy who's beating your ass throwing 89 miles an hour and you're throwing 94. You'd be an idiot not to learn from that guy and find out how he's doing it. So for all those reasons, I think it makes a lot of sense to have him back. And we talk about competition so much and not handing these young pitchers a job. Well, this is one area where, unlike the Michael Taylor thing, where the Royals actually have a lot of hitters who deserve an opportunity to play center field and need that playing time, the Royals have a lot of pitchers who may deserve the opportunity to throw. Well, they need to really prove it this year.
And like I said, I had a number of conversations here over the last week or so with folks around the ball club, and Zack was something they thought was going to get done, and now it appears that it has gotten done. I will say this: I think if he pitches, duplicates last year, 15, 16 million total, Just to be clear, I think the incentives are going to push it up there. Minimum 13, 14 million is where I think he'll be, but maybe even a little bit more than that. And yes, you bring him in, and you know what it does? And let me tell you, because I saw this one from, let me put this one up here from Brian. So they could have left Lyles in free agency and spent another $30 million a year on 2 other starting pitchers to possibly compete this year. Listen, we had our guys. Randy and I have talked about our guys, Andrew Heaney, Nathan Eovaldi. Let's be clear about something. You got to get them to sign here, right? Like, and how much more are you going to pay? Like we pointed out that Gilmesh, the 4 for 40 is what everybody in baseball is offering him. The Royals had to give him an extra year, a 5th year, and go $1 million per. 5 for 55 is what it took to sign him. So the idea that whatever you see somebody else signing someplace else, they're going to come and sign in Kansas City after they almost lost 100 games is erroneous. Jordan Lyles' job, Greinke, is to be a mentor and teacher, but also to occupy one of the spots. You know, to Rany, your point, you just said, you know, they have some guys that could. Well, here's what we know. Jordan Lyles will take up 1 spot. Brady Singer will take up 1 spot. Zack Greinke will take up 1 spot. There are only 2 spots left. There will be real competition to be a part of this rotation. That is what Jordan Lyles is here for, to just take the ball every 5th day and to force the young guys to compete, to force them. It's not being handed to them the way it has been for quite some time. And Zack does it. They needed Zack to be a part of that as well. Otherwise, you've got 3 spots open. As it is now, Brad Keller, Daniel Lynch, Chris Bubich, Max Castillo, at least, if not Jonathan Heasley as well, and Ryan Yarbrough, who I think they actually envision more as a long guy. But Ryan Yarbrough, they'll probably talk about competing for the rotation when they start. I think in their head, it's long guy for Yarbrough. But you now have Keller, Lynch, Bubich, Heasley, Castillo for 2 spots. Losers, back to the minors, because the bullpen's filled. You don't get to just go hang out and get the big league per diem. Back to the minors and get off your ass and get things figured out. I'm all for it. I am all for that, because I think the one thing that Dayton Moore in his mind always wanted to love his players more and love them, you know, up to where they felt better about themselves than anybody else. I sometimes you got to kick some people in the ass. This is a kick in the ass. You're not just going to be given a spot in the rotation. Love that Greinke's here. Love that now somebody's got to go out and win the job. Do I think it should all come down to spring training? Yeah, no. Spring training stats are kind of useless, right? You know, against all the guys that you're going to see. But it's not. I think they're trying to change the culture of the ball club. Adalberto Mondesi, you don't just get a free pass to be on this team whenever. You're gone. You're out. Chris Bubich, okay. You know, the slider was a big thing last year. He wanted to throw a slider. They wouldn't let him. He's going to get to throw a slider this year. And it better work. It's the pitch you want to throw. If it doesn't work, your ass is on a bus to Omaha. We're starting to play a little bit more big league baseball around here. And not just give everything to guys. And I think that's long overdue.
Here's the one potential fly in the ointment or just concern I have. Brad Keller. Because Brad Keller's getting, I think, $5.775 million. Are they going to be willing to move him to the bullpen and be a long man for that kind of money, or is he got a rotation, spot all but locked up? Because he hasn't really earned it. You talk about earning, you got to prove you can earn it. Well, and if you do give him that spot, that leaves 1 spot for.
Oh, I agree.
Every. And I don't mind that if he's earned it, but I just wonder if we talked about letting Mondesi go because he hasn't earned a spot. What has Brad Keller done in the last 2 years to deserve it? It's his last year. I understand the desire not to cut bait entirely, but
who amongst that group has done anything more than Brad Keller? I'm with you. I've seen enough. And if they had Brad Keller to trade, or they Mondesi to trade for Brad Keller the same way, fine. I'm all good for it, right? I mean, if you want to say, listen, it wasn't working here, let's go. He at least takes the ball most of the time, right? So there's a difference than him and Mondesi. But, and I'll just because everybody knows the scale, I'll use real ERA as opposed to anything beyond that. Brad Keller hoisted a 5.09 ERA out there. Daniel Lynch threw a 5.13. Chris Bubich threw a 5.58. Jonathan Heasley threw a 5.28. I mean, what are we looking at? Who out there? Carlos Hernandez, 7.39. Max Castillo. 916. I mean, I'm trying to look at all the guys that could be part of it. No one else did anything any better than him either, right? So if you gave Brad Keller the first shot at it, who got wronged based upon their brilliant performance?
I mean, I will say, just I'm looking at these numbers here, and no matter how many times I look at the stat sheet, it is just breathtaking how bad the pitching staff was last year.
Yes.
And I mean, some of this is just this this persistent delusional optimism I have that replacing Cal Alderwood with a competent pitching coach is going to lead at least one or two of these guys to make significant gains immediately. But the flip side of that is maybe one of those guys is Brad Keller. So I mean, if Brad Keller earns a spot, with Brad, like you said, Brad Keller certainly has shown he can be an effective, above average major league starting pitcher, which none of those other guys can say. And if he earns that job in spring training, wonderful. I just want to bring up that, like, if he doesn't show himself to be an
Agreed.
effective pitcher, would they release him in spring training? You can do that, and I think you only owe the player a quarter of the salary. Like, it's a sort of harsh business move that actually would make me feel a lot better about the Royals as an organization doing things differently, and that results do matter now. I hope it doesn't come to that. I just think that you can't you can't spend all this money bringing in guys like Lyles and Greinke and even Ryan Yarbrough to create competition and make these guys earn their jobs, and then just hand Brad Keller a job regardless of how he looks.
Agreed. I believe that Brad Keller will be traded. That's what I think about. If he pitches at all, he will be traded because the Royals aren't going to. He's not going to sign now in season, right? That's left town. It's kind of what Joe Sheehan said about Mondesi. Why would Mondesi sign now if he starts playing well? You want to get to free agency, take advantage of it. Why would Brad Keller sign now? This marriage will end at the very latest the first few days of October, right? Or it will end sometime before when he is traded. Somebody loses somebody. He's looking good in the spring. Somebody loses a starting pitcher. Dealt. Trade deadline. Dealt. Worst case scenario, he finishes the year in the bullpen and they go their separate ways. But I do believe that this is it. That, like, they understand that they can't tie up a bunch of money in a guy who's not a difference maker. I think the Tampa Bay roster construction is here. And, let's be honest, the guy who stands out like a sore thumb is Salvador Perez at 25% of their payroll. They're talking about 85, 90 million. He counts 20 million. I mean, that's the one that stands out. And how are they going to do that moving forward? I don't know. MJ Melendez, I think, is going to catch and play left field like he did last year. But can we be open to letting the new staff of coaches, and I think you are, but I'm just saying to the fans in general, let's see what they can do with these guys. Let's see what the coaching staff and the new people that are added into the development side of things, let's see what they can do. Because I'm optimistic that you can see young guys get better. And I think they've gone far enough. I think that 2018 class, it's crap or get off the pot time for them.
Yep.
I mean, or they're going to start getting pushed out for guys that they're going to start acquiring and that are going to move right past them.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that, I mean, this year, I think we have no choice but to give the Royals a pass for, the fact that they are instituting a completely new system of pitcher development. And the only way to find out if it's going to work with, and which guys it's going to work with, is to give all of those guys an opportunity. And I'm comfortable with that. And I am, as much as it hurts, I am prepared to look at 2023 from a success or failure standpoint, less about wins and losses and more just about the development of players for a roster that can win in 2024. I mean, I think Piccolo was asked, when this team can get done, and I think his answer was 2024 or 2025. And I don't like constantly pushing it out, but I'm okay with the fact that he didn't even, sugarcoat that 2023 is not the year. I do hope that the Royals appreciate how fortunate they are to have a media market where people like you and me understand that, sometimes wins and losses, success and failure isn't always measured in wins and losses, and are willing to give them that opportunity. I also, you mentioned Salvador Perez. I want to put this out there that, look, as emotionally, trading a guy like Salvador Perez would obviously hurt. But from a purely analytical cold-hearted standpoint, you talk about, the Rays, the Rays method doesn't really work with one guy hogging up a quarter of the payroll. A Salvador Perez trade would be, a seismic movement in, JJ Piccolo's brief GM career. And in a lot of media markets, I think that regardless of what the merits of the deal were, there would be a tremendous amount of pushback from the media, local media, about trading a beloved franchise icon. And I think the Royals need to know that, like, we're willing to look at, moves based on their merits, and trading Salvador Perez right now might be in the best interests of this organization, because he's not getting better. He's getting older. And if his bat slips even a little bit, or his defense slips even a little bit, we already know he's got framing issues. Maybe that they can work on that. But like the moving him right now from just a pure baseball standpoint might actually make sense. And I remember
You
the hardest.
think?
Yeah,
You-
but you say that like it's obvious, but you know what? It's not
It
obvious
is
to a lot of
obvious.
people. But not to a lot of people. And sometimes I'm worried that the Royals are more worried about like how the fans will take a trade like that. And I just want to say, there are media markets where they will get savaged on talk radio from here to kingdom come for trading a beloved franchise player. And as somebody who has, looked at the Kansas City media market from the outside for 20, 25 years, I've always been amazed at how rational and, sort of, the people like people who are in a position to set the agenda for for sports talk in a city are willing to actually not go the easy route and play the emotional route and, set up their hot takes, but actually judge everything on their merits. And looking back at the Zack Greinke deal is the closest comp to that. I think you and I were part of the reason why, as devastating as that was emotionally for fans, I think that the fan base accepted this might be the best thing for the organization. And I mean, looking back, does anyone doubt that that was one of the absolute most important moves in a good way the Royals have made in this century? And I think as Salvador Perez, you're not going to get the kind of return you got for Greinke, but like, if you could trade Zack Greinke, that means you can trade anybody. And I love Salvi, but for the best interest in this organization might be to move him. And if the Royals, I would hate for the Royals to limit themselves from making a move like that because they're worried about it. It would be a very Dayton Moore thing to not do that because we owe it to the fans to let them see their best players and blah, blah, et cetera. The human factors matter, but they don't matter 100%. And if Salvador Perez, if an offer is out there for him, I think the Royals should consider it.
Listen, Kauffman Stadium can be empty with Salvador Perez or without him. So I mean, like, you can talk about it. I mean, I've had these conversations with people. I'm like, the whole idea of, we got your guys around, and when Dayton made his comments on that podcast that the fans wanted, they'd rather go through the trials and tribulations than win. And he ended up, I talked to him about it. He's like, that didn't come out the way I wanted it to. And he said, I understand where people took it that way. That's not the way I meant it. I actually think it is kind of the way he meant it, but maybe not all the way he meant it. I think he knows Royals fans want to win, right? But I think Dayton really believed that, like, they want their star players here. This is a different time, right? And I believe JJ Piccolo knows, and I think he's got an owner that knows winning is the only thing that turns the turnstiles. Salvador Perez and players like him are like old shoes that are super comfy, that look like crap, that you won't let your wife throw away because you love them, but you never, ever wear them. Everybody can say they love Salvador Perez, but businesses are run when people buy tickets. No one's buying tickets to see Salvador Perez play. So if you need to trade him, they will trade him. I think if something comes up, and I put this one up from Nick. He said, well, what's the Rangers catching? Thinking, okay, Dayton Moore would go get him. Yes, that's one. But let me also tell you, Pedro Grifol is with the White Sox.
And Salvi loves Pedro Grifol. Like,
He
I know.
unfollowed the Royals when Grifol did not get the manager's job. All right, let's keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Now, he came around. I think he's back following him. But he was hurt when Pedro Grifol did not get the job. And so if the White Sox wanted to put a feeler out, and if they wanted to bring something, I think that could be a distinct possibility. And so, listen, I don't think they will actively try to trade Salvador Perez. I don't know how much money. I am being told that, yes, they are now The David Glass years, you couldn't eat money in any kind of deal. They can eat money now if it makes sense to the ball club. So if they got to move Salvador Perez and they can get a package of prospects and they got to take some of the payroll for it, they will do it. But I don't think they're out there actively shopping Salvador Perez. I think they like him being on the ball club. They like him to be part of a transition. Let's see if they can make him better behind the dish, right? Like all the little things in baseball games. His pitch framing, not good. I'm hearing there's some optimism that they got a plan as to how they can make that better and make him a better catcher.
Which is a great thing to hear. It also makes you wonder when did the Royals become aware that pitch framing for him was an issue? Like, Well,
I think they've been aware of it. I don't know that they necessarily knew. They were working on it. I heard about different drills and different ways they wanted to catch the ball and do things to try and do it. But they've got some new approaches.
Okay.
And I think eventually it's going to start getting out.
Well, I'm just like if I wasn't a Royals fan, I would be absolutely fascinated by just this organization in 2023 because it's like what happens when an organization that is behind the curve suddenly brings in all these new people and puts them in positions of authority and, manager and pitching coach and several other positions in the organization from an organization which is way ahead of the curve. And can you teach an old dog new tricks? I'm very, very curious to see what happens. There will probably be some great successes. There will probably be some humiliating failures. I don't know which will be which. I don't think the Royals do, which is part of the reason why this is going to be a, kind of not just a transitional year, but more of an experimental year. But I am very interested to see if they can make Salvador Perez into an average pitch framer. That dramatically improves his value and also tells you that they're heading in the right direction of actually getting the most out of their players.
Let's leave with this. By the way, we've got nice jersey, Rany. Thank you for getting on the bandwagon. We did have somebody who said they want to know what you thought about the Chiefs win. You are sporting your Patrick Mahomes jersey for this on the podcast. What did you think about we'll close with this. What did you think about the game yesterday? Because somebody said, I always enjoy Rany's Chiefs takes.
You say we close with this, we might be here another hour. I mean, obviously,
keep it to a couple of minutes.
I mean, the obvious, whatever you think Patrick Mahomes is, he's better than that, right? I don't know if you saw the tweet he sent out after the game, and one of the things I love about Patrick Mahomes is how quietly petty he can be. But he sent out it was his entire tweet was just one of the all-time great gifs of bowler. I think it's Pete Weber, the bowler, doing you know what I'm talking about, the who do you think you are? I am, which I just thought was absolutely brilliant because he's very polite and very measured in his words, but he knew he was being disrespected by the people who thought that a Bengals victory meant that Joe Burrow was actually a better quarterback than Patrick Mahomes. And as someone who has been writing about, in fact, at this point, I write more about Patrick Mahomes than I do about the Royals because every year I will write one or two articles for the Ringer. I had a Ringer article on Patrick Mahomes just a week ago. The idea that anybody is in his universe is just absurd. Statistically speaking, wins and losses speaking, by any metric you use, Patrick Mahomes is not just the best quarterback in the world right now. He has a compelling case to be made that he's on a trajectory to be the greatest quarterback of all time. And Tom Brady has set a very imposing standard, and it's going to be years before we can really evaluate that in any kind of rigor. But that's Patrick Mahomes is better than everybody thinks he is, and everybody thinks he's great. Everybody thinks he's amazing. He's even better than that. So that's one. The second thing I would say, though, is I don't think he was necessarily the best player in the game yesterday. And I mean, obviously he was playing on one ankle, so I didn't expect that. But the best player in that game was Chris Jones. And that was one of the most dominant games, start to finish, from a defensive player I've ever seen. Because, I mean, yes, he got 2 sacks and pressures, but every single play he was blowing up, and he was being double teamed the whole time. It was just absurd. I'll finish with this, that when the Royals won the World Series in 2015, what made it even more special is that it kind of exercised the demons of 2014 and not beating the Giants. We've talked about this, how, Alex Gordon didn't score. Then he comes back the next year and hits the home run and does score in the bottom of the ninth inning of Game 1 of the World Series and turns that entire series around. And by the end of that championship, the loss the year before, if not completely erased, it certainly made it part of a bigger story, that it was just a setback on the way to success. I was absolutely terrified of playing the Cincinnati Bengals because if we had lost that game, it would have just been a narrative destroying loss. All the crap, like I said, Joe Burrow is a better quarterback, and the Patrick Mahomes can't beat the Bengals, et cetera, et cetera. It would have been intolerable. But having won that game, if the Chiefs go on and win the Super Bowl, and that's a very tall task, but if they do, it will accomplish something I thought would have been very, very difficult, which is essentially, if not erase the memory of last year's AFC Championship game, but again, made it almost a necessary setback on the way to success, because quietly that game it was one of the most devastating losses in Chiefs postseason history. And we've had some doozies, as you know. Like I'd rank it behind 1995, the Lynn Elliott game, behind 1997, losing to Elway for sure. But honestly, I might rank it ahead of almost every other game in my lifetime, because I mean, to blow an 18-point lead at home with the Super Bowl ahead, the way they did, the only thing that kept it from being truly devastating was the fact that they had already won a Super Bowl, and that made it easier. If they hadn't, that would have been an all-time devastating loss. So the idea that could actually almost be erased by getting revenge against that same team in the same stadium a year later and going on to win, it is a extremely blessed time to be a Chiefs fan. And I'm riding this wave as long as I can, but I'm just, the Royals are fortunate because, there's very little pressure on them right now. There's very little, sense of urgency, and we're all in a pretty good mood. No matter, the Royals could have, traded Adalberto Mondesi for Unieski, Betancourt, and Nefi Perez, and I think my anger would have been muted, because the Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl, baby. Again.
Yeah. Matt said it. Don't bring anybody down with this podcast today, because everybody in Kansas City sports is on a big time high right now. And you said it. And I saw a couple people mention Rany joining our Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. I'll give you my thoughts on it tomorrow at 9 p.m. Central when we do our Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Rany, great stuff today, as always. Always great talking Royals baseball with you, the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, co-founder of Baseball Prospectus. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. I want to thank our fine sponsor, Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. No commissions, free consultations, in-house crews. Nobody will solve your parking lot problems better than Gann Asphalt. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Tell them you heard about them here on the Kaufman Corner podcast. We're back at it. A little prospect talk we're planning on, at least for right now. We'll see what else the Royals get done. But next week, talking about some prospects and getting ever closer to headed to spring training. It's going to be here before you know it. I believe the Saturday after the Super Bowl. Is when I'm headed down. So spring training starts just a little bit after the Super Bowl, as late as the Super Bowl is. So very soon we'll be talking about actual spring training baseball. So until next week, for Rany Jazayerli, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us at Kaufman Corner.